Across all of human history, historians estimate that more than 1 billion people have served in uniform. The United States military today has 1.4 million. This video asks one question. What happens when the full weight of that history meets the modern battlefield at once? The scenario. The US military in its current configuration fights every major army in history, era by era. Not one civilization, all of them. The forces? Rome at its imperial peak, the Mongol Empire under Genghis and Kublai Khan, Persia under Xerxes, Napoleon's Grand Army, the Ottoman Empire, Qing Dynasty China, the Wehrmacht at 1943 strength, Imperial Japan, the Soviet Red Army of 1945. Combined manpower across all three waves, over 24 million soldiers. Weapons ranging from iron swords to tiger tanks. Logistics ranging from horse convoys to total industrial war. The United States today, 1.4 million active personnel, 6,000 tanks, 2,000 combat aircraft. A defense budget of $886 billion. One rule. No nuclear weapons. Conventional warfare only. 3 phases. What the US loses in Phase 1 stays lost in Phase 2. There is no resupply from the future. The exhaustion compounds. Phase 1. The ancient and medieval armies. The first wave arrives in ancient and medieval configuration. Rome's legions at their 2nd century peak, roughly 450,000 men across the empire's frontiers. The Mongol Empire's mobile horse archers, approximately 250,000 at their height under Genghis Khan. Persia under Xerxes, an army modern historians place near 300,000, combined strength approximately 1 million soldiers, iron swords, composite bows, siege engines, and horses capable of covering 100 miles in a single day. A mobility standard no European army matched for another 700 years. The technological gap is nearly 2,000 years. An Abrams tank can destroy a target 2.5 miles away before it is ever spotted. The Mongols' longest range weapon, the composite bow, worked to about 350 yards. The first hour resembles less a battle than a demonstration. But here is what US planners did not anticipate. The Mongols do not form up at all. No massed lines, no fixed position. The same doctrine that broke slower medieval armies for 1,000 years. Riders scatter across open terrain and raid supply convoys at night. On ground, no sensor was calibrated to expect. 2 fuel trucks and a forward resupply column are lost before reconnaissance adapts. The first proof that even our 2 millennia gap has edges. These are the armies that built the frameworks modern militaries still study. Roman logistics, Mongol mobility, Persian scale, outmatched by every measurable metric. They advance anyway because their doctrine assumed that losses were the price of ground, not a reason to stop taking it. On the ground, the Abrams is invulnerable to everything Phase 1 fields. The legions and the Persian formations collapse within the first engagement, but the Mongols fall back deliberately, drawing American patrols into terrain built for ambush, forcing fuel reserves to stretch and time to pass. US losses in Phase 1, between 300 and 500 killed. 9 vehicles lost entirely to Mongol night raids. No tanks destroyed in direct engagement. The US wins. But the Mongols did not need to defeat the United States. They needed to cost it fuel and time. They succeeded. Phase 2. The Gunpowder Armies. This is where the mathematics get serious. The second wave brings armies that fought at the edge of industrial war. Napoleon's Grande Armée at its 1812 peak, 600,000 men under a corps system still taught at West Point. The Ottoman Empire, roughly 400,000 including the Janissary Corps. Qing Dynasty China, nearly 1 million men on paper, though poorly modernized by the 19th century. Combined additional manpower, approximately 1.9 million soldiers. Phase 1 depleted a portion of US forward fuel reserves and a share of precision-guided stock that will not be replenished. There are 1.4 million American soldiers now facing gunpowder armies operating on muskets, massed artillery, and in Napoleon's case, a tempo of movement that broke empires with twice his manpower. Modern infantry fire rates exceed an entire 1812 battalions. Precision-guided artillery hits targets a Napoleonic gunner could not even see. The technological gap remains close to absolute. But here is what the second wave understood that the first never got the chance to try. Pressure on 2 fronts at once. Ottoman and Qing forces open a second theater while the Grande Armée is still engaged at the main line, and for the first time, American logistics are stretched across more ground than a single supply chain was designed to cover. Fuel convoys running resupply between fronts take losses no phase before this one managed to inflict. These are the armies that fought at Austerlitz, at Vienna's gates, at the Opium Wars, men operating within a command structure, some of which the modern US Army still studies in its own field manuals. They are not in a hurry because Napoleon's doctrine never depended on matching firepower. It depended on making the enemy fight in more places than it could reinforce. US losses in Phase 2, between 1,800 and 3,000 killed. Approximately 40 aircraft lost or grounded for parts. Precision-guided stock down to roughly half of what Phase 1 left behind. The US wins Phase 2, but combat power is reduced by 15 to 20%, and for the first time, the margin is narrowing on paper, not just on the battlefield. Phase 3, the industrial peak. The third wave is the most dangerous force human history has produced. The Soviet Red Army of 1945, 11.3 million soldiers, 35,000 tanks, 15,000 combat aircraft, the largest single military force ever fielded. The Wehrmacht at its 1943 peak, 9.5 million men, Tiger and Panther armor. A combined arms doctrine still studied in staff colleges. Imperial Japan in final wartime configuration, nearly 6 million under arms, entrenched and willing to fight past the point of rational resistance. Combined additional strength, over 26 million soldiers against a US force already down roughly 20% of its combat power and most of its precision-guided munitions from 2 prior phases. Precision munitions are below operational minimums. The Air Force is rationing what remains. Artillery is switching to unguided rounds. An F-35 still kills a Yak-9 or a Bf-109 every time. An Abrams still defeats a Tiger or a T-34 at any range it can see one. But an Abrams that runs out of fuel because a Soviet armored column cut the supply road overnight is no longer a technological asset. It is a 68-ton obstacle. US armored units are fighting in place rather than maneuvering. The one scenario modern armor doctrine is built to avoid. The Red Army does not need parity. It was built to absorb losses that would collapse any Western force and keep advancing. At Stalingrad, it took 1.1 million casualties and emerged on the offensive. Here, it does not need to defeat the US military in a single engagement. It needs to outlast what 2 prior phases already spent. These are not faceless numbers. They are the survivors of Kursk and Leningrad, of siege winters that killed more men than most countries ever put into uniform, fighting alongside a Japanese military that has never been afraid of a casualty count. Tanks that win every engagement they reach start arriving late to the ones that matter. US losses in Phase 3, between 210,000 and 340,000 killed. Approximately 1,300 to 1,500 aircraft lost. Between 900 and 1,300 tanks destroyed or abandoned for lack of fuel. Precision munitions at 0. The US wins every individual engagement in Phase 3. It runs out of the resources to keep having them. Final verdict. Phase 1. The US defeats the ancient and medieval armies decisively. The cost is fuel and time, neither recoverable. Phase 2. The US defeats the gunpowder armies, but combat power drops 15 to 20% and precision-guided stock is cut in half. Phase 3. The US does not win. Outnumbered more than 15 to 1 in the final wave, with the reserves already spent across 2 prior phases, it is ground down by attrition. Total US dead between 212,000 and 344,000. Total historical losses across all 3 phases, between 15 and 18 million. The kill ratio is extraordinary. The United States kills dozens of enemies for every American lost. It wins every battle. It loses the war. The US military was not built for this. It was designed to fight a peer adversary for a defined period in a defined theater with a political framework for how it ends. Not 24 million soldiers spread across every era of human history with no end date and no exit. Technology sets the price of each battle. It does not decide the war. Once an enemy has enough soldiers, enough eras, and enough willingness to absorb losing them, the calculations stop applying. The strongest does not mean unbeatable. It never has.